Well, hey everybody, how you guys doing out there? I just thought I'd kind of share with you some of the things that have been just sort of weighing heavily on my mind here of late. Um, as you guys probably have noticed, I've sort of been laying low here of late, just kind of being sort of in the background, maybe a little bit out of touch, maybe a little bit out of reach, and there are a number of reasons for it. A lot of it just has to do with time. I mean, so many things are cutting into my time, work-wise and family-wise and things like that, which, all those things are a part of life, and so naturally you have to balance what you do with what's going on in your life, and so that's a big part of it. A lot of what I've been doing lately is trying to catch up with projects. So whatever time I do have left is generally sort of taken up with the making of videos and the doing of projects, because it's just, to me, that's what I do. I feel natural doing it. To me, it's just part of the whole evolution, if you will, of the movement, or progression, if you will. I think that word works a little better, but in any case, but there have been a lot of things, just psychological factors as well, that I think have played a role. A lot of times, for example, if I've been working really, really hard, or I've suffered setbacks or disappointments or whatever, there's certain things that weigh on me kind of psychologically, and instead of probably motivating me to work harder, I probably succumb to a lot of negative thoughts and a lot of negative energy. And so what I thought I'd kind of do today is to kind of unload a little bit of my concerns and a little bit of my negativity, not in the spirit of being negative, but just in the spirit of being honest and open, which I try to be. If there's anything I'd like to be able to say about myself in the final analysis about whatever my contribution to this whole thing may or may not be, it's just that I've always tried to be very much myself, very much who I am. I've never tried to go for a public image or a public persona. I don't put like intro music, and I don't do all these little sound effects or whatever. I don't put in like hypnotic cues, and I don't run a whole lot of eye candy and ear candy and stuff. Basically, my videos and whatnot that I put out have very little in the way of production value and very little in the way of fluff, and probably as a consequence suffer in terms of their mass appeal. And so looking at that, I sort of blame myself for a lot of things. The videos that have done well are generally been done by other people. Like, I know that the Book of Enoch narration that I did a long time ago has got probably close to 2 million views by now, but somebody else put it together with a whole lot of eye candy and stuff, and that's the one that people watch, more so than my own. And I know that the videos that I've been with, like with Trey Smith, and where he's mentioned some of what I've done, that those videos have done well, because one thing about Trey, he knows how to put together a video and make it compelling and get people to watch, and so he's skilled as far as that's concerned. I, however, probably lack a lot of the pizzazz, and probably what little I could add, I'm very hesitant to, because I, for my own reasons, really want to appeal more to a person's rational faculties than their visual or auditory faculties. I want people whose hearts and minds are in the right place to be the ones who, at least at the very beginning, are the ones who are disseminating this information and absorbing it and internalizing it and universalizing it, and just basically using it towards their own ends and for their own purposes and their own projects. Last thing I want to do is to trivialize or to commercialize or to sensationalize something. But having said that, there is something to be said for the fact that what it is that I'm saying has the potential to be sensational, and has the potential to be enhanced by people who have abilities, people who have abilities to sing, to play instruments, perhaps to draw pictures, to do animations. And so part of what I've been thinking here of late, although I really 99% of me just really hates to even go there with this, I've been thinking about ways in which we can maybe try and work together. Maybe people could, either on their own or in collaboration with me or someone else, you guys can get together. There's plenty of room for comments and discussions and stuff down below every video. And I feel like all of you who are drawn to various topics and various subjects should be thinking in terms of what can we do, and especially what can we do together. Because as I've stated so many times in the past, I don't number one feel myself qualified to run an entire organization. I have just about zero leadership ability. I have just about zero ability to speak publicly and to inspire a crowd. What I say is very matter of fact, very just straight up, bare bones. And probably to most people would be thought of as rather uninteresting. In fact, my voice has been sometimes compared to Ben Stein or somebody else who may be just deadpan and just not very interesting. And the reason for that, I think, is just because the way my mind works. I feel like in myself it's enough to say something that is objectively true, and that I don't have to color it with a whole lot of emphasis. I know I am capable of it. I'm capable of being, adding a lot of personality, but I feel like the strength in not doing that is that it comes across that you're very matter of fact about things, and you're not arousing people's emotions, and you're not arousing people's anger, and you're not sort of hypnotizing people with your charisma or whatever you might want to call it. I don't think I have any charisma, but in any case, this should not be centered around personality. This should not be centered around anything contrived. It to me, and this is kind of what bothers me too about Christianity in general, and religion also, just in general, is that people are very satisfied with institutions and with traditions and with things that are organized and cut and dried and well accepted and respected over time. And so those kinds of things add legitimacy. The duration that the church has been around for some people is impressive, or the universal sort of, it's believed more or less all around the world. The widespread nature of it maybe convinces people. A lot of people believe this. A lot of cultures have adopted this or whatever belief, and so therefore I feel confident that it's true. And the entire essence of everything that I'm saying is that a Christian, or a person who believes in truth, a Christian or any person who believes in objectivity, as they are reading the scriptures, should not go over things that are objectively there as if they weren't there objectively. And moreover, and perhaps even more importantly, those people who are charged with, who are responsible for the transmission of these truths down through history and down through time, it would be important for them to be faithful in their transmission and faithful in terms of their objective treatment of the facts. And what we find is that this is not the case in Christianity. You can find, like, for example, if you can find a 1611 version of the King James Bible, for example, if you read Hebrews chapter 11, and it makes a reference to the book of Maccabees, and if I'm not mistaken, there is a footnote in the 1611 version, or at least one of them, that shows that reference. In other words, when this has been known for a very long time, but it doesn't appear in subsequent Bibles, it means that people are actually taking what is known and hiding it from people. Or when Bibles don't footnote pseudepigraphal references, as they should, because see, it's a lie to hide something that's there. And this is something that the church is guilty of. And because of the institutions that everybody respects, and because of the widespread nature of it that everybody sort of admires and accepts, because the belief is so widespread that that sort of by itself is the basis for people's belief, that it's not so much the scriptures themselves or their understanding of it, but the traditions and the acceptance of something that people respect even more so than the words that are there, which I believe is why Paul states, that we should let God be true and every man a liar. Reason being, because I think in the end it's basically telling us outright that every man will be found to be a liar, and therefore because they have not let God be true. And so this is kind of the essence of the message, that the truth is that the church is guilty of a great many crimes against the truth. And since God is truth, that amounts to crimes against God. Because those who worship God, because he is a spirit, must worship him in spirit and in truth. So if you blaspheme against the truth, then you're blaspheming against God, because God is truth. And if you're blaspheming against the spiritual nature of the scriptures and subordinating them to men's reason, in other words, then this is blasphemy against the Spirit. And we understand that blasphemy against the Spirit is the one thing that God will not forgive, not in heaven, not in earth. And so when we look at the last 2,000 years, and it's really hard to say that Christianity has been a stellar sort of achievement in the history of mankind, because the church has not been stellar in the way that it's handled itself, and especially in the way that it's handled the truth. For me to come out 2,000 years later and say something that really isn't revolutionary, to affirm what the prophets say as opposed to what men say, and then to be able to point out and to overturn 2,000 years worth of Christianity, it is a tremendous achievement, but it really isn't anything. It really is just doing what you're supposed to do. If you go to Jude and he says that Enoch is the seventh from Adam, you just agree. Don't disagree. If he says that he prophesied, then you say he's a prophet. Don't say he's not a prophet. When Jude applies the prophecy that he speaks to the men who are infiltrating the church in his day, if you're letting God be true and every man a liar, that means when you read in your little study footnotes or whatever, where it says that Enoch was really written, in the Maccabean or post-Maccabean period, that's not true, because it's not Jude's opinion. But because we've allowed Jude's statement to be overridden by men in their assessments of this book, that we have essentially committed a crime against truth and a crime against the Spirit, which of course necessitates our suffering, because we have blasphemed by calling God a liar when he has stated that Enoch is the seventh from Adam, that he did write this prophecy, and that prophecy bears upon Jude's time, and we have disagreed with that. And again, remember, the serpent was the most subtle of all the creatures. Very subtle. And this is a lie, and it's so subtle that people somehow don't recognize it. People somehow don't see that it's just a simple matter of fact that you believe differently from Jude, and that the church teaches differently from Jude. And complicating the matter, making my job a whole lot easier, in other words, you have a secondary letter, which is 2 Peter. And this letter takes and incorporates Jude into its second chapter, and essentially acts as a defense of that book. And again, we Christians, how do we handle that? We handle that fraudulently as well. We don't take Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and spread them out. Okay, we realize on some level that these works are interdependent somehow. It hasn't all been worked out entirely, but we treat them as though they were one gospel. However, we don't do the same thing when it comes to 2 Peter and Jude. And the reason why is because putting those two letters together and studying them together with the idea that what Jude is saying should be affirmed rather than negated, Jude having affirmed that his source is antediluvian means that the book is old, whereas people, scholars, Christians, have stated that it's not, that it's Maccabean or post-Maccabean even in origin. Some even go so far as to say post-Christian in origin. So we have a wide degree of variability in what people think, yet we seem to, as a group, disagree with Jude. And so that seems like that's being unfaithful to the Scriptures, to side against the Scriptures, and to take the side of men and scholars. So how is God supposed to deal with that? Is he supposed to just look the other way and act as if that isn't true? You know. But again, when you see Peter picking it up, why in Jude where it says that we should fight for this faith that was once for all delivered unto the saints, okay, and we see that Peter, in a sense, would have no other reason for picking up Jude and defending it, except for the fact that Jude is probably under attack, and the book of Enoch and the Assumption of Moses and whatever else Jude may or may not be quoting that's pseudepigraphal, those things are something that Peter is defending. And so Peter has acted in the way that Jude has asked us to act. And yet we have not followed Peter's example. And as a matter of fact, to whatever degree we have divorced Jude from Peter, 2 Peter, we have in a sense given the lie to Peter as well. Because Peter was picking up and defending Jude. Now we've gone and twisted his meaning entirely and made it something else entirely, because it doesn't fit in with the theological scheme that we ourselves have pushed. And so therefore, to make ourselves right, we have to make the prophets wrong. And again, it's one of those just subtle things, and yet it may seem like a small thing, and yet it's a tremendous thing. When Jesus speaks of the law, he says that not so much as a jot, not so much as a tittle, is going to pass away from that law until the whole thing is fulfilled. Now, how much more could we say about an institution that has taken and deliberately subverted truth the way that they have, that has deliberately taken and destroyed facts that are there, and hidden them, and yes, destroyed them. I mean, we wouldn't have the book of Enoch today were it not for the fact that the church's reach did not extend into Ethiopia. We would not have, for example, the Gospel of Thomas today had it not been for the fact that somebody somewhere couldn't burn the book, had to go and hide it. Why? Because obviously not everybody thought that book was bogus. Not everybody thought that the book of Enoch was bogus. Some people may have, not wanted to toe the line, but didn't have a choice. And so we find things in people's tombs, and we find things in jars hidden away in caves and in the ground, and because people don't want to let go of these truths. So it's evident to me that people believe these things and took these things seriously. And I think that it's incumbent upon us as the church, anyway, as the body of Christians out there, to question just what it is that we've been taught. You see, this doesn't pull the rug out from under Christianity. What it does is it pulls the rug out from under the false Christianity that has been foisted upon us to unveil the true Christianity that underlies it. And one of the things that's really disappointed me, almost to the point of angering me, is how, for example, I've had something like a public presence, a public persona on the internet, on YouTube, for almost 7 years now, since 2007. And with the exception of a few individual pastors and preachers, Christians and churches have not, by and large, reached out to me and embraced any of this and taught it publicly. Which, to me, it feels like there's been enough time for them to have done so. That I think for 7 years, any of them who might have been looking up Enoch, any of them who might have been looking up the Apocrypha, any of them who might have been looking for an audio book or something, I have a feeling there are a lot of pastors out there who watch this show. I have a feeling there are a lot of you out there. I have a feeling that a lot of you could help, but aren't. I have a feeling that a lot of you could have helped, but didn't. And I have a feeling that a lot of you will hear this, and it will touch you deep down inside and fill you with a little bit of guilt for what you are currently doing and what you are currently not doing. And yet I have a feeling that a great many of you will still ignore it, because it's convenient for you and you know that the truth could cost you. So these are the kinds of things that anger me, because again, I'm trying very hard not to think in the natural here. But I'm asking you people out there who have a voice and who have a say and who have a congregation or who have influence within a congregation, why aren't you standing up for this? Why aren't you standing up for the truth? I mean, what could be so important that you would let a wrong go unrighted? That you would let essentially what amounts to a crime against the truth and therefore a crime against God to just go uncorrected? I know a number of people that I've had contact with who've gone to their pastors. I've spoken with Rick, who's Jesus Love 723, and over and over and over again he has approached his pastor. Now, he hasn't left his church, mainly because he hasn't been kicked out yet, but he's gone to his pastor over and over and over again, and even though his pastor cannot counter-argue to the point where he can prove his own case satisfactorily, okay, the guy still will not teach this or even really study it or try to even get a grasp on it. It's something they don't want to mess with. And the question, I guess, is of what validity is an institution that does this? And of what validity is an institution that actively suppresses facts, that actively suppresses literary data? If any of us were reading something like Shakespeare, or any of us were reading some other kind of secular piece of literature, if there were allusions to Greek mythology, let's say in Shakespeare, Roman mythology, whatever, if there were allusions to history, you would look down at the footnotes and say, oh, this is an allusion to this myth, or this is an allusion to that historical event, or this is an allusion to this political thing that was going on at the time. You would not expect there to be any kind of systematic cover-up of allusions to mythology or allusions to history in literature that's passed down to us. Even if you're an unbeliever and you treat the Bible purely as literature, just as if you were reading Shakespeare, just as if you were reading Beowulf, right? Wouldn't you at least demand the same standards of fairness that any other piece of literature would automatically get? Wouldn't you expect the same level of honesty and openness and intellectual honesty that you would expect from any other piece of literature? It is because this literature lies in the hands of interested parties that this information is suppressed. And it's because this information is distributed among interested parties, such as Christians who have a preference to believe certain things rather than their own eyes, or rather than their own ears, and rather than their own God even, that we have this charade. And it is a charade. It is a lie, it is a cover-up, and it is deliberate. And anybody who's out there, especially you pastors and ministers, I know there's some of you are out there, listen to me. Very few of you have reached out to me. And the ones who have had guts enough to reach out to me also have expressed to me concerns that they might have with their congregation, but they do it anyway. So a few of these people have integrity. So it isn't impossible for you to go against the flow. To me, if you are a man or woman of God, you should be a man or a woman of truth. And if you profess to believe God, that it is your duty as a Christian. And again, we all have our duties. I'm not asking you to do anything. Don't you think God is asking you to do this? If God is the truth, don't you worship him in spirit and truth? Paul speaks of something that's called our reasonable service. Okay? I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking on behalf of Paul. I'm not speaking on behalf of myself. I'm speaking on behalf of Jude. He says to fight for this faith. Peter actually did. He took Jude and he defended that book. And what did we do? We misrepresented what Peter did. We took it and buried it behind 3 Peter, right? Why? Because we didn't want people reading those 2 books together. And why? Because what happens when you do read those books together? You realize there is a relationship and that there is something for us to unravel. This is the tool that God gave us in order to bring these books back into the fold. We have the literary basis to do this. We have these allusions that actually are in the scriptures. I mean, Enoch is just one of them. Jude also speaks in verse 9. He's referencing the assumption of Moses. The book of Hebrews, chapter 11, 35, 37 are both allusions to apocryphal and pseudepigraphal books. The armor of God that every Christian knows about and likes to quote, right, is an allusion to the wisdom of Solomon, chapter 5. Which, again, where is your breastplate of faith? Where is your helmet of truth when you deny the truth? You see what I'm saying? In other words, we are hypocritical as Christians in every way imaginable. That we would take an example such as the armor of God and almost make that the symbol of our Christian, heritage. That we are Christian soldiers who put on this faith, and yet we deny the source that came from. There's something really very ironic about that. There's something really very telling about that, and it's just the kind of thing that ever since I realized any of this stuff has always been just that little grain of sand that just irritates until you build upon it and build upon it and build upon it, and then you realize that there is this whole pearl that is there that nobody sees because they don't value the truth. They come across something like that and they look for reasons to sweep it under the rug rather than explore what it means. They look for reasons to justify not telling other people rather than being honest about it. And you see, they don't catch the fact that they're becoming dishonest in the process. They don't catch the fact that they're misrepresenting God in the process. They don't realize that these are the kinds of sins that they are committing in the process. But I've always kind of been a little bit different from most people. I don't want to play the game. I don't want to have an organization. I don't want to be like the church, and I don't want to be like the synagogue. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. We can be free agents in the world. We can be use our own talents and our own abilities and our own venues, and each of us has access to, if we go to church, we have access to other church members, no doubt, possibly even pastors or people that may have some place or influence within that organization. We could change the world. We could at least bring, if we actually brought the subject up and we actually reached a certain critical mass, we could make it. It's so easy to do. You see, who's going to disagree with facts? They may disagree with conclusions, but the facts are on our side. And all of the facts point to the fact that if our New Testament prophets especially, but our Old Testament prophets too, are quoting extra biblical material, it's a constant feature that you find over and over and over again. There is this constant referencing of non-canonical material. And it brings into question any notion of canonicity, especially in the way that we understand our canon, because our canons don't really seem to resemble what the writers of the scriptures themselves adhere to. It's not borne out in their writings that they only adhered to, say, the 24 prophets that the Pharisees accepted, let's say. It doesn't really bear out, not when Jude is quoting the Assumption of Moses and the book of Enoch in the same book. It doesn't really bear out when we understand that Paul is quoting the wisdom of Solomon throughout the book of Romans, that he's quoting the life of Adam and Eve in 2 Corinthians, that he speaks of Jannes and Jambres by name, which it doesn't mention in the Old Testament, but there is a pseudepigraphal book of Jannes and Jambres, etc. There are so many examples of these things within the scriptures that anybody who had any kind of honesty, even an atheist, even a non-believer, should look at Christians and put pressure on them to at least not be hypocritical, in the sense that they affirm the Bible and yet they negate certain things that are factually there and can easily be demonstrated. See, the truth is not on their side. The facts are not on their side. And this is why it pains me that the truth alone and the facts alone haven't been enough to dislodge this fraud from our midst. You know, these days, 7 years is a long time. You know, these days, the world changes overnight. We could affect this change if we wanted to. If we all got together and united, we could do this. And I think that myself, I don't see myself as a public figure. I try to stay in the background as much as I possibly can, because I don't know, I'm just very out of tune with this world. I'm very out of tune with modernity. I'm very out of tune with technology. I feel very out of place, to be honest with you. It isn't to say that I'm strange or that I'm weird. It's just that I've gotten to the point where I so don't think like other people. And I've gotten to the point where I so just don't value what other people value, and I just don't see what other people see, that I do feel like a stranger on this earth. And I do feel that what I do and what I say should be adequate. And it should be enough. That the world requires something dramatic. That the world would require something flashy to get their attention. That the world should require music and visuals and protests and parades and big things and spectacles and all that. All that is the problem. The solution is simply to discredit it on a purely factual basis. The truth doesn't always have to be sensational. It's going to be sensational enough just looking at the fallout. Because if we simply stick to our guns on the matter, and if we simply at least are pugnacious enough to where we don't back down off of what we believe, if we at least do that much, we can make inroads and we can make headway. We don't want to make ourselves hated, and we don't want to make ourselves like the institutions as they exist today. The institutions as they exist today are not driven by truth, they're driven by numbers. The institutions as they exist today are based on economic models and based on democratic models and based on organizational models and types. And they have tax exemptions and they have rules, and they subject themselves to so many worldly things and so many worldly principles that it just isn't useful. A free person, such as myself, such as yourself, someone who has really no authority, nothing at stake, strangely you have a certain power, and that is the power of the truth. You've got no one telling you that you can say this and you can't say that. Just say what's true. You got nobody telling you that it's not your place or your position. You got nobody playing politics. You got nobody out there trying to be number one. If we all just took advantage of the opportunity to speak forcefully but truthfully, respectfully, but at the same time emphatically about what is true. You see, we can force the issue. We can say to the mountain to move because we have the basis to say it. The facts are on our side. The truth is on our side. And what I keep hoping for and really praying for is a realization, a spiritual realization among Christians that the truth alone is enough. If only we would all do it. If only we would all just speak the truth and be a light. That's really all the Bible expects from us. That's really all they command us to do. To shout it from the rooftops, to be a light, to love one another, and to exemplify what God wants us to be. To embody the holiness that we ourselves strive for and search for. I think after 7 years, I think there's a strong enough base, there's a strong enough nucleus of people who are interested in these things because of the truth that is behind them, and not because of the flash and the glitz and the glamour and the sensationalism. There are a lot of topics I could have spoken of, but the essential facts are the essential facts. The essential facts are that we do have references that we can use and we should use, and we should push these issues, because there was a reason why they burned these books. It's because they were popular and because they were read. There's a reason why they effaced all of these references from the marginal notes, and that was because they had an agenda, and their agenda did not involve the Apocrypha, did not involve the Pseudepigrapha, did not involve anything that fell outside of their neatly bound parameters of whatever canon they accept. And because of that, all of the teachings had to be skewed in that direction. And whenever the teachings are skewed in a direction and there's something that refutes it, then it either gets glossed over, explained away, or just simply ignored. And that is what has happened. We've taken facts that we do know and we've hidden them from public view in a spirit of dishonesty in order to enslave our fellow Christian. And I guess it bothers me that we are comfortable with that to any extent. We should not be comfortable with being that way. We should see our brothers and sisters out there as having been exploited by an institution that puts itself above truth and above God. We should see our brothers and sisters out there as people who have been lied to by none other than the powers of the devil himself, because it is only in his interest that we don't know these things, but it is in the interest of God that we do. Because if we do follow through on this, what will happen? What do you suppose will come of this? If we are able to elevate this to any kind of public forum whatsoever. With truth on our side, we have the ability to convict them before the world, both secular and religious. And with the secular and religious world focused on the deliberate deception of Christians for 2,000 years, the world isn't full of people who love Christians, number one. There are a lot of people out there who despise Christians and despise religion, and I'm not saying that we should appeal to them, but what I'm saying is this argument is enough to convince them. Because if they only accept the Bible on its literary basis only and not on a factual basis, in other words, they don't even believe in God, or they don't even believe in our God is true, you can still appeal to them with the argument that if we as Christians accept these scriptures, then we are thereby bound by these scriptures. And if they see that we are not treating our scriptures the way that we ourselves claim to be treating the scriptures, we leave it open to them to point out our hypocrisy. And so that itself is a catalyst, because even the unbelievers can look to the Christians and say, you don't even affirm your own scriptures. You don't even believe what you claim to believe, right? And that puts them on the defensive. Because, see, how do they even argue with atheists? The truth is, they're going to have trouble arguing with anybody who understands this. Because anybody who understands this, even if they are a disinterested party, can back them into a corner and can force them to confront the reality that they are affirming God and yet denying His word all at the same time. So, anyway, I'm not quite sure just what I was getting at with all this, but I'm just kind of getting it off my chest. This is the thing that's been really weighing on my heart and soul, and so I just thought I'd throw it out there. I think we have way more power than we use. I think we have way more to show the world and to offer the world than the world knows. And it's a shame that we sit with so much in our hands, so much that we can do, so much that we can change. And somehow it just hasn't happened. And I don't know what it's going to take. This is why I appeal to such a wide variety of people. And this is why I sort of put myself in the background as much as I possibly can, because I feel like it's enough to point things out and to encourage others so that others may be empowered. And in the end, with everyone doing what they can, using whatever talents, whatever time, whatever resources, whatever connections, whatever sort of just natural born ability or whatever that they can to contribute, this is where we are strongest, when we are decentralized and when we are all free to speak just exactly what we believe to be true, and when we are all free to act without the restrictions that would be placed upon us by traditions and by institutions. We can transcend all of that, and that is a tremendous freedom. You see, Jesus came to set us free, that we should see the truth and that would make us free. All right? And so we should all strive to accept His truth so that we can be free. And see, those of us who have been freed from these notions, from these false teachings, those of us who have been freed from it, right, it is in a sense our obligation at that point to, in our reasonable service, to spread that knowledge so that other people can be free. And so with that, I leave it in your hands. Do what you can to spread the word. Do what you can to affirm the truth. And with all of us doing our part, we can reach that critical mass. Remember, the world changes overnight these days. We can change the world if we try. And I think that's what God is really waiting for us to do. He's really waiting for us to act. Because when we act, then He can join in. If we don't act, all right, then He's not going to do everything for us. He needs to know that we are willing to meet Him at least halfway. But when we do our part, I think that we will see Him getting behind us. And I think that we will see him making that difference, because I know that it's possible. Those of you who understand me realize that this is inevitable, that it will happen, and it really is up to us to try and do as much as we can to move this whole thing forward. Other people can, like I said, other people can read, people can animate, people can narrate, people can draw pictures, people can, songs, poetry, anything that we can do to push this whole thing forward, we'll push it forward. So, go get busy, go do something. Anyway, talk to you later. Bye-bye.